The rain came down in a silver curtain, the kind that makes the city feel both smaller and more secret. Neon reflections bled across the wet pavement, turning potholes into little moons. Inside the diner, the air smelled of coffee, frying oil, and the faint perfume of someone who had tried to look put together and given up halfway through. She moved between tables like she belonged to the space, the practiced glide of someone carrying too many plates and too many worries. Her server apron was frayed at the edges and held tiny splatters of lives she'd lived before anyone bothered to ask. "Another coffee?" a customer asked without looking up. "Sure," she answered, voice steady enough that the man didn't notice it trembled. Smiles were part of the uniform. They cost nothing and bought a softness that kept tips coming. He had been watching all morning. Not the regular kind of watching that counted orders and remembered birthdays, but the kind that counted people. A man with the refined shape of someone who had stopped wearing the word struggling a long time ago. His suit pressed into a river, shoes too immaculate to have seen an alley, his smile lined and efficient. He had slid into the booth like he owned more than the table, like he owned a map of the block. When she first saw him, she kept to her work. He caught her eye once, and when she blinked, he gave the sort of look that contained both apology and calculation. He was the sort of man who caused people to straighten their spines in the tiny domestic arenas where dignity was still negotiable. He ordered the lunch special and a side of pity, if there was such a thing to order. "Put the pie with the coffee," he said, "and tell the waitress I have a question." She nodded. Questions were part of the job. Some asked for extra napkins, others for advice. This one pricked like a thorn. She approached his booth with the plate and a polite smile. "Is everything all right?" she asked. He folded his hands, the cuffs whispering privilege. "I don't often ask for things. I'm in a position to help. But first I want to see you do your job. Impress me." She set the pie down with practiced precision and didn't look at him as if she were used to that brand of scrutiny. People liked to watch. It made them feel alive. The request was small, and it came with an edge. "How?" she asked. "Bring me a refill when my cup is near empty. Bring me sugar. Walk with purpose. I want to see how much care you put into service," he said. He paid extra for the experiment. An invisible coin slipped into the air, and for an hour she performed to his audience. She moved through trays as though rehearsing a dance that had been choreographed by necessity. Customers laughed, the cash register sang, and somewhere a radio played a song that slept in the back of people's brains. He watched, occasionally inclining his head as if making notes. When the lunch rush broke, he called out, "I need you in the kitchen after your shift." "Of course," she answered. She didn't tell anyone. The other servers had theories. He'd come back with an offer, with a promise, with pity. Pity was a currency she could not accept. She had bills with names and due dates and a mother who called every other night, whose voice trembled when she mentioned coughs. The kitchen smelled of onions and smoke. Heat pooled like a lazy animal. The chef didn't look up. She washed plates like she had washed away mistakes her whole life. Fast, clinical, but with a care that was not for show. He stood in the doorway like a man making an entrance in a play he wrote for himself. "Can we talk?" he asked. She kept her hands moving. "I'm on the clock," she said. 10 minutes. I promise it won't be anything that will affect your job," he said. Promises were soft things. She had learned to fold them carefully before tucking them into pockets where they wouldn't cut. She dried her hands on a towel and faced him. "I own a few businesses around here," he said. "You ever thought of working somewhere else?" "Management pays better." She smirked. Something like a laugh pressed behind her ribs. "I've thought about a lot of things," she said. "I pay what I can. Management usually wants to see a resume with nicer handwriting." He leaned forward. "Not everywhere. I run a foundation. We help with education, with placement. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering opportunity." She thought of classes she couldn't afford, of a certificate program that would mean nights away from the diner, of the quiet hope that her sister could go to school. Opportunity was a door she had seen painted in glossy brochures, nice but distant. "Why me?" she asked. "Because you carry yourself differently. People notice you." "I want someone who understands grit," he said. Grit. The word landed like a coin on a hard floor. Her life had been sand and sweat and small victories. "I'm not interested in handouts," she said. "I'm not offering one." He paused, then added, "Can I take you to lunch tomorrow?" "Not here, somewhere quieter. I want to talk about a position." She wanted to refuse. She also wanted to take the rest of the week and stitch it into something that might look like security. She said yes because sometimes a no closes paths faster than a cautious yes. That night she lay awake listening to the pipes sing. Her mind ran the options. This was either a door or a trap. She'd learned that men with good suits and kinder words often expected gratitude paid in ways that didn't show up on a pay stub. She had rules written in invisible ink. Keep distance, keep truth, never allow a pitying hand to become a tether. The next day he arrived in a black car that smelled faintly of cedar. He met her at the diner door at noon. They went to a small bistro 2 blocks away, where the lighting made everyone look slightly famous. He spoke in business language, growth metrics, community initiatives, leadership training. He offered her a role as an assistant coordinator at a youth center he funded, a job that came with regular hours, a decent salary, and a possibility of advancement. He mentioned mentorship programs, tuition support, and an emphasis on promoting from within. "Do you need time to think?" he asked. "I'll start Tuesday," she said before her fear could order her lips into caution. Saying yes felt like stepping onto a platform that moved. For the first few weeks she woke with the kind of hope that made her stomach flip. The center was clean and humming with earnest energy. Children crowded around like small suns. Her days were no longer 9 to 5, they were 9 to yes, meaning she had to learn to say yes to new responsibilities. She grew, small movements, learning to write emails without apologetic phrases, handling budgets with the precision of a woman startled by her own competence, speaking in meetings and feeling the air move because people were listening. He visited, always professional. He praised her work in front of others. His compliments were like scripts, rehearsed for maximum impact. She began to trust the rhythm. The city felt slightly kinder. Her mother could sleep through the night without coughing into the phone. Then, in the middle of a week that smelled like burnt toast and clean laundry, he stood at the center's door with a guest. The guest was a board member, stout and varnished, with a tendency to talk loudly. He introduced her with a smile that had teeth. "This is our assistant coordinator," he said, "a crucial part of our outreach." After the meeting, as people dispersed and the children ran like punctuation marks across the courtyard, the board member walked up to the office door and sneered. "Does she know how to handle difficult parents?" he demanded, a provocation disguised as concern. He reached out and shoved open the door. Her back was to them as she filed paperwork. "Please stop kicking me," a small voice whispered from the hallway. The board member's expression flicked between confusion and humor. She turned. A child stood there, holding his shoe thumb in his mouth. He had obviously been playing near the storage closet and somehow kicked the box that fell and sliced his toe. She crouched without thinking and examined his foot. The child's face was white with a bravery he had learned at 10. "I didn't," she said, voice low. "You tripped over the box." The board member smirked, and then, with the kind of cruel impulse some people use to measure a person, he reached out and nudged the child with his polished shoe. "Come on, son, stop lying. Women like her make up stories to get sympathy," he said. The room went cold in the way a sound can be cold. She stood up, jaw tight. "Don't you dare," she said. He chuckled, a sound like coins. "You see? She talks back. Maybe she has a temper," he said. He stepped closer. The child flinched. Without warning, the board member planted his shoe against the girl's shin and gave a quick, disrespectful kick, hard enough to make her stumble, not hard enough for a police report. He laughed. Laughter spread in the room like a stain. The moment stretched. Someone murmured, "Well, she must have provoked him." Someone else shifted their feet. The board member's hand smoothed his suit as if the act were a performance, a test he had administered. She grabbed the child's shoe, set it on, and wrapped his small foot with a paper towel, every movement precise. Her hands did not shake. She thought about all the times she had been kicked, by landlords, by lovers, by the heavy hand of the world. Each kick had a way of claiming a story and leaving a bruise that took its time to show. Her body remembered. Anger warmed her veins with an old steady fire. "That's enough," the man with the suit said. He had been quiet, watching at the edge of the scene with his fingers laced. He closed the space between them in 2 strides that seemed to soften the air. "We don't treat people like that here," he said. "Look at him," the board member scoffed. "He owns the place. What does he know about humility?" He smiled, but it didn't feel like his. "Practiced charm." There was an edge of something real now, discomfort or a conscience. "I know enough to know this is unacceptable," he said. "We value dignity. Apologize." The board member opened his mouth, but instead of apologizing, he scoffed and turned away. The mood in the room changed. The most dangerous thing about confrontation is not the act itself, but the company that gathers around it. People waiting to see which side will define the story. Some would later say they were on whichever side made them look safest. After the board member left the room in a huff, the man in the suit turned to her. "I'm sorry," he said. "I shouldn't have let that happen." She thought of the smaller humiliations that had accumulated: a landlord who changed locks, a neighbor who left a note, the man at the bar who called her names. She had not expected him to fight her battles. She wanted to say, "Keep your apologies." Instead, she said, "Thank you." The word felt oddly like armor. That night the story leaked. People in the neighborhood had a way of stitching narratives together with the speed of gossip. Someone saw the shove, someone heard the insult, and a camera phone had recorded the echo of a laugh. The clip made its way to social channels where outrage lived like a hunger. People took sides quickly, sometimes violently. The board member's reputation was a slow spinning wheel. The footage picked a spoke and held it up to the light. Her inbox filled with messages, offers of legal aid, offers of interviews, offers of money, some genuine, some performative. Comments were a peculiar species of wildlife. Some were kind and luminous, others sharp and hungry. She read some and deleted more. For every person who called her courage, another asked what she had done to deserve it. The world loved to pretend that justice was an algorithm and that videos settled truths. She knew better. She also knew that sometimes truth needed witnesses. The billionaire's assistant called her the next morning. "He wants to meet you," the voice said. "He says now." She hesitated. The call felt like a tug-of-war between new possibilities and old instincts. She met him in a park this time, an unfussy place where children flew kites like flags against the sky. He sat on a bench, hands in his pockets in a way that looked less curated than before. "I saw the clip," he said. "I'm sorry I wasn't there sooner." "You were there," she countered. "You left it to someone else." He winced. "I didn't realize it would escalate like that. I didn't want to be the man who defended you for the wrong reasons. But watching it unfold made me realize something." "What's that?" she asked. "That some things can't be swept up with press statements, that dignity matters, that people, especially those we hire, aren't props in our stories," he said. She listened. The park smelled like cut grass and the distant grease of street vendors. He looked tired, as if some belief had shifted inside him. "I can make this go away," he said. "We can pay for legal counsel. We can manage the narrative." "I don't want my life managed," she said. "I want my life to be mine. If this is about PR, I'm done." He nodded. "Then let's do it your way. We fund a community legal clinic. We put resources into de-escalation training for centers. We set up an anonymous reporting line. I want to put power where power belongs, with people who can use it to protect themselves," he said. She had plans, yes. Small ones she'd sketched on napkins between shifts. A list of names who deserved help. An idea for a scholarship fund for workers in service industries who wanted to go to school. He listened, and for the first time she watched a person convert apology into action. Word spread that he had taken on the board member. He didn't vilify the man publicly, he pursued a quiet accountability. The board member's presence dissolved as his peers shifted allegiance. The small victories stacked: a public apology issued by the center, mandatory sensitivity training, an internal review. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't theatrical, but it felt durable. The child recovered. He used the incident like a badge, telling the story at family dinners with the raw pride of survival. Her mother cried once when she heard about the changes. "You deserve to be treated like a daughter," her mother said, voice thick. "Not like someone who can be kicked aside." As things settled, the attention that had felt like both a sun and a spotlight began to cool. The city moved on, which is how cities redeem themselves, by forgetting. But the trail of what had happened remained in the people who had stepped forward. Volunteers signed up at the new legal clinic. Cookbooks were donated to shelters. The scholarship fund took its first application. One evening, months later, she stood behind the counter at the center's annual gala. People she had once served as customers now shook her hand as colleagues. Children performed a small play they had written. their voices banding like bright instruments. She watched them and felt a peculiar, measured pride. The man who had once watched her over coffee sat nearby, hands folded, eyes not searching but content. He had become less of an experiment and more of an ally. After the performance, a young woman, one of the scholarship recipients, came up and hugged her. "You helped me apply," the girl said, tears wet at the corners of her smile. "I start classes next week." "You did it," she said, meaning it. Her hands smelled of lemon from the dish soap they had used to clean the dining tables earlier that day. The dishes were a memory of another life, not a weight. The millionaire caught her attention and raised his glass in a small private salute. She clinked his gently and said, "Remember when you asked me to show you how I worked? I remember. I thought I was testing you. Turns out I was the one who needed the lesson," he said. "What's that?" she asked. "About humility. About noticing the people who move the city without insisting on the credit She smiled, a thin, honest crescent. It wasn't that he had given her everything. It was that he had offered a platform and then stepped back enough to let people build on it. Power had been used and then returned. As the night wound down, she stepped outside alone for a cigarette. The streets smelled like rain that had forgotten to fall. She watched the city do what it always does, breathe and begin again. There were no grand proclamations, no headline declarations beyond the small ones sewn into people's days. The life she had was still not perfect. Rent still sat with that same sharp hunger, and there were bills that didn't notice kindness. But there were fewer nights when fear sat in her chest like an animal. On her walk home, a man leaned out of a car window and catcalled. For a second, the old reflex flared: duck, ignore, vanish. Instead, she turned and said, "Not tonight." His laugh died like an engine that won't start. Sometimes saying two words makes a bigger noise than a crowd. The city kept its secrets and its small mercies. She learned that being kicked didn't mean you had to stay down. It taught her that standing up was less about fury and more about choosing who you let into the architecture of your life. The billionaire had become a complicated punctuation in her sentence, neither savior nor villain, but someone who learned to use privilege as a bridge rather than a barricade. The next morning, a little boy from the neighborhood skipped into the center and shoved a crayon drawing into her hands. It was messy and enormous and painted with the true labor of a child's devotion, a picture of a woman with a cape. Underneath, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for not letting them kick you." She laughed until tears pricked her eyes. The world, she thought, would always be a place of small cruelties and startling kindnesses. The measure of a day was not whether it contained violence, but whether someone chose to respond. She had been kicked, yes, but she had also been steadied, defended, and given a chance to bend the arc toward people who needed it most. Outside the center, life pulsed with ordinary noise: the honk of a cab, the bark of a dog, the high note of a street vendor's call. Inside, people ate soup and told jokes and studied for tests and learned that names could be held without being used up. She pinned the child's drawing on the bulletin board where everyone could see it. Nobody who walked in that room could ever doubt for long what dignity looked like. Some nights she still dreamed about the man with the polished shoe, the repetition of humiliation like a bad record. In her dreams, she rewrote the scene. She didn't flinch. She stepped forward. She spoke and everyone listened. In waking life, the world was messier, but the waking world had something else too. A chorus of people who would not let one man's laugh decide the shape of another's life. When her shift ended, she walked home under a sky that had decided against rain. A woman called her name from across the street and waved. She waved back. In her pocket, her phone buzzed with a message. The scholarship fund had received its first applicant from a single mother who wanted to become a nurse. She read the message and felt the small, steady ignition of something that might last. She folded herself into bed, the city humming like a living thing beyond the windows. Her life had been a sequence of small choices that added up into something that looked like a story worth telling. She thought of the man in the suit and the day he'd leaned forward and promised opportunity. She thought of the kick and the way it had made her count the people who stood behind her. And as sleep took her, she held a simple, fierce thought. People can choose to protect one another. It is quieter than headlines, but louder where it matters. It is the true architecture of a city. She slept knowing small choices,